Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for its 28th year of NFL action. Just click the link below in my description box and sign up today. BetUS.com, where the game begins. Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Out Up My League. I'm Nick Diaz. I hate empty stats. I hate them. And the reason is two things. One, they lack context. And number two, and this kind of goes into the context theory, the human component. Analytics cannot tell you how hard a team is playing. They cannot tell you how hurt they may be, the locker room drama, all that stuff. They can't tell you those things. Computers are not human beings. See, last week against Tennessee, I saw the stat of, LSU was undefeated in 11 a.m. games this century. Okay, that lacks context because most of those teams that LSU played sucked, and LSU was a huge favorite. But here was another stat that was very, very similar that came up this week. This is per Scott Rabelais of The Advocate. Since 2004, when LSU has lost the previous game, they've gone on to beat Florida the next week. So, let's look at the context. LSU, in 2004, they got blown out by Georgia 45-16. The next week, they go to the Swamp and beat number 12 Florida. 2014, LSU gets blown out 41-7 by Auburn. The next week, they go to the Swamp and they beat an unranked Florida team. 2017, LSU has an embarrassing loss at home to Troy. The next week, they beat number 21 Florida in the Swamp. In 2020, LSU gets blown out by Alabama in the COVID year 55-17 at home. The next week, they go to the Swamp, the shoe game in the fog, and they beat number 6 Florida. And last year, LSU got blown out by Kentucky 42-21, and the next week, they beat number 20 Florida in Tiger Stadium. I hate empty stats, but that stat tells us something that's rather consistent. They all have one common denominator, and what is it? All are embarrassing losses to superior teams the week before. 4 of them blowouts, but one of them was a close loss to Troy. That was totally embarrassing. Maybe the most embarrassing loss LSU has had this millennium. See, I said before the season, I liked LSU's chances to beat Florida on the road more than I even liked them to beat Tennessee at home. And the reason why was simple. The matchup favored LSU, but I also knew for sure that I was going to like LSU even more after getting their ass beat by Tennessee at home last Saturday. And many people question why, but it was pretty simple. Because what we tend to forget is that the human component of getting embarrassed the week before does have an effect on you. Because all hellfire and brimstone from fans and media members is raining down on you and your team. And then you add the fact that LSU, logically, on paper, matches up very well against the Florida Gators. See, all these people that are shitting on Brian Kelly, saying that he's doing a horrible job in his first year and that Billy Napier's doing a better job right now coaching, do y'all realize that Florida is statistically worse than LSU is in all but 2 categories? Run offense and special teams. That's it. Other than that, Florida is significantly worse than LSU in just about every other major statistical category. So I don't know why people are praising one coach and shitting on the other when statistically one favors the other. Actually, I do know why they're shitting on him. It's called optics, but that's neither here nor there. LSU's offense is struggling right now. That's the big topic of conversation, right? They're struggling. But they've had bursts of success in some quarters of football. Some against competent opponents. A few quarters against Florida State, Mississippi State in the second half, and then Auburn for about a quarter or two. Well, you know what all those quarters of successful offense have in common? It's not scrambling. It's not even the passing game, because Lord knows that didn't happen against Auburn. It was what? Running the ball up the middle. Tempo, helps, especially at the end of halves, but they all had one thing in common. They started to run the ball better. And all of those teams are significantly better in run defense than Florida. Matter of fact, Florida is second to last in the SEC in run defense. Their defensive line is objectively horrible. And the talent that they do have on the team at linebacker is really undisciplined talent when it comes to gap schemes and communication and all that stuff. Well, you know who came back this week for LSU? Offensive tackle Will Campbell, which means Bradford can go back to playing guard and help you in the run game up the middle. I mean, y'all, if you're worried about LSU's ability to run the ball in this game, know this. Kentucky is dead last in the SEC in rushing. Dead last. And they were able to go into Gainesville and push Florida all up and down the field in the run game. So if LSU can't run the ball, that's just on them. And on the other side of the ball for Florida, the offense is great at running the ball themselves. They are. They are, I don't want to say elite, but close to elite with their run game. They have a great veteran offensive line, and they have a good stable of running backs, young and old. Here's the problem with Florida. Their passing game is 10th in the SEC. And quite honestly, it probably should be a lot worse because the second half against Tennessee, the Vols played prevent and let Florida back into the game. So it's sort of an inflated stat, if you will. So it's not just Anthony Richardson's passing that's also a problem for the Florida Gators. Florida's wide receivers are just not good. Like, they're just not good at getting separation, running routes, all that stuff. But more importantly, what has LSU's defense been so good at so far this season? Specifically, forcing turnovers. Well, you know what team and quarterback is a turnover machine right now? Anthony Richardson and the Florida Gators. Anthony Richardson is so reckless with the football, has been his entire career at Florida, and he's doing it in a run-first conservative offense. It's not like they're throwing the ball around the yard a lot. And I'll say this about their offense. So I covered Billy Napier in Lafayette last season, and we had him on every week on our radio show, and another show I did also, they would bring on the sideline reporter for the ULL Ragin' Cajuns and talk about, how the football team was doing. Well, the biggest criticism that ULL fans had of Billy, which is the same criticisms Florida fans have of Billy Napier so far, and I think Billy's a great head coach, by the way, but he is not a great play caller. He's not horrible, but he's just not that great of a play caller. And the biggest problem is that he is either too conservative or he gets too cute with his play designs. It's either too conservative or it gets a little too cute. It's very little in between. But here's the more frustrating thing that Billy Napier does as a quarterback coach and as a play caller, and he's done this everywhere he's been. He will take a running quarterback and coach him to stay into the pocket, so much so that it's to his detriment. In other words, there will be wide open lanes to run, and he'll coach his quarterback not to use his feet as much as he should, or design run plays for the quarterback as much as he should. He did that with Levi Lewis and Lafayette, did that a lot with Levi Lewis and Lafayette, and he's doing that now in Gainesville. To a lesser extent, because he understands that his team's not as good as, the rest of the SEC right now. So he has to use Anthony Richardson in that regard more than he's comfortable doing. So he's done some nice things, but make no mistake, Matt House is not going to be fooled by Billy Napier. This game is all about execution, not necessarily fooling your opponent from an offensive standpoint. The LSU cornerbacks, they're not going to get beat on man-to-man coverage by these wide receivers unless there is a busted coverage like there was against Auburn. See, everyone talks about those 300-plus passing yards to Robbie Ashford. Those are inflated empty statistics because 2 or 3 of them were chunk plays on a busted coverage where LSU was shifting guys around. And more importantly, freshman Harold Perkins was made for this game. It's see-ball, hit ball for a young Harold Perkins. All he has to do, spy Anthony Richardson and follow him around. That's it. All good news, right? Well, here's the one problem LSU can run into. Florida runs the ball extremely well. They're very dynamic, very versatile in their run game. And Florida's best offensive lineman, guard Osiris Torrance, he might not be able to go for the game. But I don't necessarily think that will cause LSU to have a better game plan when it comes to stopping the run. Because even though O'Cyrus Torrence is very good, O'Cyrus Torrence is a guard. And guards usually help with the interior of the run game. Well, Florida's success statistically in running the football is actually not up the middle. It's off tackle on the outside. Not in between the tackles with the guards, off tackle. Well, you know where LSU's run defense has been the most susceptible? When teams run off tackle against them. So that's not a good matchup. But with these Florida wide receivers being what they are and the quarterback being just inefficient and erratic and throwing 66 yards total against Missouri's defense, LSU has to load the box, put Harold Perkins on the outside as a spy towards Anthony Richardson, and say, you know what? If Anthony Richardson beats us in the passing game with these wide receivers, God bless you. You deserve to win. And LSU has to stay committed to the run game on offense, which, if they do, they should have some success. All of these things, plus the human component, I'll say LSU wins the game 20-17. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Or follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok in the description link below.